And really what it comes down to, and this is the element that startles me so much because it's applicable to any human endeavor, literally any human endeavor. What we've discovered in aviation was that 95% of our accidents, our fatal accidents, were a result of human failure. Not pilot error as such, although that certainly can be involved. That's what I call professional discretionary error. But it was mostly being human beings and failing at times. And what we had built that system on, which is precisely what medical has built the system on worldwide, is the expectation of perfect performance 100% of the time by human beings, which is virtually impossible. Recognizing that in the 80s and turning it around and say, if we can't get rid of human error, then we better start building buffers to absorb the errors that we can't get rid of. That was the beginning of the renaissance in aviation safety, which has brought us to the point now where we have about 94,000 flights over the world every day, commercial flights on which any of us could buy a ticket, and almost nothing ever goes wrong.
Can you share more about what has the airline industry done to make that the safest way, and then how that can be translated, as you said, or as you were mentioning, to any other field where human beings are involved?
There are several components of this that are fascinating because they're a little bit obscure to the average individual looking in from the outside and from corporate life too. First of all, it's the recognition, as I say, that human beings are incapable of 100% perfection 100% of the time. And no matter how much you yell and scream as a manager or a leader, you're not going to be able to transcend that completely. Now, we can certainly get to the point, as we've done in aviation, of minimizing the number of errors that become serious. But at the end of the day, you've got to have a systemic ability to absorb the errors that are still going to be there. That's why we don't want to have less than or fewer than two pilots in a cockpit and have them equally capable of handling the airplane at any given point in time. That's why you don't want to have a situation in which there's a pilot, for instance, who sees something wrong and reports it and nothing is done. That is an anathema to basically
Mhm.
aviation safety the way we know it today. And the other thing too, and this is so important, we have an organization that is one of many of them around the world called the National Transportation Safety Board. There are many great safety boards around the world. The British have one world class one, and so do the Dutch in Amsterdam. But the thing is, what we have learned to do in accident investigation is start off by saying we don't care about blame. Blame is for the lawyers. They can figure that out later. We don't care about blame. What we want to know is every single solitary thing that went wrong, large and small, that might have contributed to this accident, because it's not just one cause. When we had a lot of accidents going on 30 years ago, I was still doing broadcasting. I would roll out of bed sometimes at 3 a.m. in the morning, and I could do 45 seconds just from memory without even knowing the facts of what had happened on the basis that there was never just one cause in an airline accident. And what sometimes it appears that you could say this is obviously what happened. There were contributing factors. Even if a pilot makes a terrible mistake at the last minute, what was his or her mental attitude? What had their previous 72 hours been like? Had their training been like? There was always more than one layer you could pull back to get to the truth of it. Now, when you translate this into corporate life, and into the business of running a business, one of the most important aspects is that everything that goes wrong, large or small, is a message from the underlying system. And if you're deaf to that message, or you don't have a systemic ability, or you're a leader who just basically pushes that away and says, I expect perfect performance, you're not going to be anywhere near as effective. And you may be disastrously ineffective because you're not going to pick up those lessons. So it's one of the greatest aspects of what we have learned to do, and we're learning in medicine, but it's bringing over it from the aviation industry and from nuclear power generation and from the building trades, is this idea that we've got to look for every message the underlying system sends. You remember the Challenger accident, the first space shuttle that we lost. That was a result of many different factors, but one of the key elements was the inability of the system and individuals in it to listen to a voice from the wilderness, actually from Utah, trying to say, hey, it's too cold to launch. But because they were not used to listening to messages based on anything that had gone wrong in the past, they were deaf to it. And we saw the result.